Good morning to those of us joining here in the US, and good afternoon to everyone joining from the UK and Europe. I'm so glad you could join us for this Refashion Week NYC panel discussion on embracing circularity. My name is Tammy Yoler, and I'll be hosting today on behalf of MPB. MPB is the world's largest online platform specializing in used photo and video equipment. Photographers, videographers, and visual storytellers around the globe buy, sell, and trade in cameras, lenses, accessories at MPB, and I am really happy to share that we're on track to recirculate about 300,000 items this year. And as a circular business, we are absolutely thrilled to be talking to leaders from several innovative circular businesses today. It's going to be a really good session. And with that said, I'm going to give a brief intro to all of our panelists so you'll know who will be speaking today. And then I'm going to be asking them to share their experience and insights about embracing circularity in business. And we'll reserve time at the end to answer some questions from all of you. Let me do some brief introductions here. So Jen Zuckley is a Brooklyn-based mother of two and founder and CEO of the Swoondle Society, which is the first of its kind children's clothing trading platform. Swoondle members have done over 100,000 trades and have responsibly recycled over 2 tons of textiles. The Swoondle mission is to keep all kids' clothing items in play longer, whether they're traded amongst members, donated to children in need via their partner nonprofit Room to Grow, or domestically textile recycled via their nonprofit partnership with Green Tree Textiles. Welcome, Jen. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Also happy to introduce Chloe Marie Songer and Stuart Alam. They're the co-founders of Thousandfell, which is building the first at-scale platform for circular footwear. Thousandfell has launched the first fully recyclable sneakers and has built a back-end supply chain that allows them to collect, separate, and recapture materials to put back into new sneakers. Thousandfell is working to pioneer closed-loop retail to help solve the waste problem in fashion. Welcome, Chloe and Stuart. I'm really delighted that you're here as well. And last but not least, we have Anthony Rossi. He's the Executive Vice President and Business Development for both TerraCycle and Loop. TerraCycle offers a range of national, easy-to-use recycling platforms, and as well as Loop, a circular shopping platform that transforms the packaging of everyday essentials from single-use disposable to durable, feature-packed designs. Tony's been with TerraCycle since 2012, and since then, he's worked with numerous TerraCycle and Loop partners in both the B2C and B2B spaces. We're really delighted to have you here. Thanks so much, Tony. All right, let's get into this because we have a lot I know we want to talk about. There's just so much to talk about when it comes to circularity. The first thing I want to chat about is bringing circularity to life. So in terms of circularity, we talk about that a lot, but it's always useful to have a shared definition. So I'm going to borrow from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to sort of set us up here today. Their definition is really about moving away from the take, make, waste linear economy and focusing on 3 principles: designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. So with that definition of circularity in mind, I'd like to ask each of you to talk about how you're harnessing or addressing circularity with each of your businesses. And Jen, I'd like you to go first, if that's okay, from the Swoondle Society.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm on The Price is Right here. You're the first one. So likely out of those 3, the 2 that are most resonate with our business is really that kind of designing out of waste and kind of keeping materials in use. Similar to, some of the other folks in here, we have really kind of focused, one piece of it is the kind of removing some of the packaging elements. And ours is a membership base. So we're constantly sending things out and back in. And so we want to make sure we're trying to stay away from as much of that single-use plastic as possible. So we've introduced reusable shipping bags. Additionally, with ours are individual SKUs, and I'll get to a little bit more about that. So instead of packaging each item in, a bag or a sleeve, even if you're using paper, what we've done is we've gone to upcycling at damaged goods and making little bands to wrap around stuff, so we can kind of cut down as much of that just kind of waste that it isn't really needed in the environment. And then, our kind of, as you were saying, kind of mission in life and kind of the core of our business is really focused on that kids clothes, and saying, that kids clothes is a ready-made cycle of, with adults, it's like, how do you, buy less, buy better quality, things that will last a lot longer, and really kind of the reduce factor, and buying, things that can really stick around. With the kids, they grow out of it. So they absolutely, you need to go from that 3T sweater, but you're going to need a 4T at some point. And so thinking about how to really take that from a, just keep buying more stuff only solves half the problem. It's only, keeping that kid dressed. It's like you still have this closet full of stuff, and it's incredibly wasteful. It's both financially and time consuming, and just doesn't, it's not good for the environment. And so trying to figure out a way to like make it feel good for parents to like spend and buy better quality, knowing that they can parlay those clothes into that next size or season, really lets them kind of think of clothes more as like an asset as opposed to an operating cost, which is kind of a big click for like the parent mindset. And Swoondle does a unique job of kind of making that circle of the buyer and the seller are really not buyers and sellers. It's like trade in, trade out, trade in, trade out, and make it a community kind of closet aspect, instead of focused more on like getting just a little fraction of your money back when you resell.
That's great. Thanks for that. And it occurs to me, we've got this really interesting diversity of approaches here on this particular panel. So you're a trading platform, but Stuart and Chloe over at Thousandfell, you're really focusing on design, you're upcycling and designing a product. And I'd like for you to speak a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in and tackle it. When we sort of like look at the overall landscape, and sort of the changes that are being made within retail, two of the big platforms that we've seen kind of early on are resale and rental, right? And it's been incredibly successful in certain product categories. What we noticed is that there are certain product categories that really don't fall or play nice kind of in those spaces, and footwear is definitely one of those, right? So it's like the first user of a pair of high frequency basic sneakers is like oftentimes the last. And so really realizing and identifying that with those high frequency product categories, you need an end of life solution like recycling, right? You need to be able to take it back. You need to be able to collect it, catalog it, separate it into its clean material feeds, work with individual, material recyclers, and then break those down into component parts to put back into new shoes. And that's really kind of what we've been focused on. We've worked really closely, and I'm excited Anthony's on the call with the TerraCycle team too to do a lot of early R&D on this kind of stuff. They're sort of the experts in the space. And it's interesting kind of bringing the different stakeholders around, people that really deeply understand recycling, but then also the kind of the practicalities around footwear manufacturing, right? Like I kind of joke, but it's sort of true. It's like an industry that hasn't seen real innovation in like 80 years, right? So being able to kind of work within those traditional systems and figuring out, all right, like if the traditional component parts are like leather, which are really tough to recycle, and like virgin plastic, how do we walk away from a lot of that? And how do we bring in new materials? How do we bring in like updated, manufacturing processes, whether it's with stitching or it's like removing kind of adhesive that causes a lot of contamination, and being really thoughtful about kind of what we're putting into the product, and working with the design team, with the production team to execute, so that when we do take back product, we can easily separate that the material feeds are like of a single material. So have been really thoughtful about that, and really understanding that like, hey, this is for a product category that it's going to be really hard to rent shoes, and it's going to be really, really hard to kind of resell them. So kind of bringing that third pillar of retail online.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tony, I'd love for you to jump in here now, because TerraCycle interacts with circularity in such a really different way, in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, I guess for TerraCycle, we've been around for almost 20 years now, right? Our purpose, the reason why we exist as a company is to eliminate the idea of waste, right? That's our mindset. And how that connects with circularity, I think is very, very topical. And for us, we have three main pillars of our business. The first and the oldest is on the recycling side, right? So getting back to that definition of take, make, waste, anything that is becoming waste, we want to be able to provide a solution where one does not exist, right? And we're different than the traditional waste management industry in two distinct ways. What we collect and recycle are products and packaging that you cannot put in your municipal blue bin. I think that's one of the misconceptions about TerraCycle. We're not here to recycle PET or cardboard or aluminum. We actually want to encourage people to recycle right? If you do have those types of materials, you should be using your blue bin. And you know, we don't want to be collecting that. So for us, what does that mean? We focus on everything that isn't traditionally recyclable in a municipal sense. And the reason it is not recyclable, it doesn't have anything to do really with the technology that we employ as TerraCycle. And it has everything to do with value, right? The traditional recycling industry are urban miners, right? The reason why the materials that I mentioned earlier, like paperboard, like aluminum, the reason they're recyclable is because they're valuable, right? I can collect, I can sort, I can aggregate, and I can process aluminum for a price per pound that is less than the value of that new converted format, right? So for TerraCycle, if we're looking at something like a sneaker that has a lot of different components to it, if we're looking at something in the personal care or beauty industry, like a compact or a lipstick tube, by the time we do all of those steps of collecting and aggregating and processing, the raw material that we are left with it has a lower value than the costs it took us as a company to convert it. So simply put, every time we process material, we would lose money. That is why we partner with people like Thousand Fell to help us offset those costs and unlock the recyclability of their product, right? So that's pillar one of our business, right? Where we are a recycler of garbage. The second pillar, and one that is starting to grow more and more, is how can we be a provider of recycled content? So when we're looking at the take side of the Ellen MacArthur equation, instead of taking raw materials that are mined from the earth and have a tremendously negative environmental impact, how can we use the resources that we've already extracted and refined? How do we treasure those? And how do we provide partners with that recycled raw material to use in their manufacturing instead of relying on virgin material, right? So we call that internally our storied materials department. And why it's called our storied materials department is we want to collect material that otherwise wouldn't have been recovered. So our most famous example is probably the supply chain that we've set up with Procter & Gamble and Unilever around the world, and now Pilot pens, where we're collecting and recycling ocean plastic or plastics and products that have been washed up onto beaches. And we are converting them into a format that they can use in their manufacturing chain. But it's not a recycled content that was sourced at a MRF, right? A material recovery facility. It's something that otherwise would have become waste. And it has a really unique story behind it. And we're going to be coming out with some more stories this year that I think are really, really unique. And hopefully we'll continue to build that department. And then there's Loop. So that's the third pillar of our business. And Stuart touched on it earlier around the rental model, especially in footwear. For us, as a mission-driven company, and then again, our mission being to eliminate waste, I think we realize that the recycling industry is a Band-Aid on a cut, right? We're trying to stop the bleeding as best we can, but that cut is getting deeper and that Band-Aid isn't doing a great job, right? It's recycling is incredibly important, but I don't think we can look into the not too distant future and say that if we're still living in a take, make, waste society, we're failing. And that's where Loop was born. And Loop is a platform for reusability, right? And at the end of the day, Loop is focused today exclusively on fast moving consumer good products and packaging than the actual product itself. But how do we avoid something from becoming waste in the first place? And once we've extracted this material, we've refined it and created this new package, how do we keep that package a package for as long as possible, right? And I think that's the solution that we ultimately and gradually have to move into. And that's going to be launching in a very big way here in the United States with some of our partners on the retail side. They're crucial to getting this to the public, and I know we're going to talk about scaling in a second. But just to wrap the TerraCycle piece, right? We're a company that wants to recycle weird things. We want people to make products from recycled content, and ultimately we want things not to become waste to begin with. And right now, what we've seen is that sustainability and circularity doesn't have a silver bullet, right? There needs to be a lot of different options for a lot of different people in different walks of life, in different areas of the world. And it can't be exclusive to packaging, but it needs to apply to products. And I think from our perspective, we want to be able to provide options and avoid things from becoming waste as quick as they do.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Tony. I mean, in listening to all of these answers, there's sort of like two real big themes emerge there, which is one, partnerships, which we'll talk about in a second, because I'm really excited to hear about your collaborations. But two, just the idea that all of these businesses are really meeting very tough challenges head on. Like these are really difficult and nuanced and complicated challenges that you're taking on. And circularity itself is a complicated model. And so I want to talk a little bit about how you address the challenges of circularity throughout your businesses. This came up really quick, really quickly in some chats that we did even before this panel discussion. Circularity involves reverse logistics, scaling up, embracing circularity, sourcing partners, vendors, all sorts of other stuff. I'm wondering if you could just speak about some of the key challenges that you've encountered and how you've been working to overcome them. And Chloe and Stuart, maybe you can take this one out of the gate.
Yeah. Sorry, somebody's at the door. So the doorbell might ring in a sec. We can hear them outside. So, I mean, there's inherent businesses or inherent challenges in just starting a company and starting a brand and operating all of these businesses, probably especially throughout the last year. But for us with circularity in general and sustainability in general, I mean, the first set of challenges came at the beginning of the supply chain. And this is something Jennifer kind of talked about with designing out waste, but to even make a shoe that could remotely semi-feasibly be recycled with TerraCycle, we went through about 18 to 24 months of design R&D, testing, a million changes, everything from adhesives to rubber compounds to the way things were stitched, to the way things were held together. And to take a factory that's been making footwear for 50, 60 years one way, with a ton of cement, a ton of glue, a ton of heat welding. Footwear manufacturing is a really physical process, and then get them to flip that, think differently, walk away from leather, potentially use this coconut husk, potentially use XYZ was really, really difficult. So that was the first set of challenges, and we only could have done it if we only were able to do it by having really strong relationships throughout the supply chain and throughout the manufacturing system, and having a couple of advocates that really helped us move that on. The second kind of set of challenges that we actually talked about, Tammy, earlier with you, I think, is as a smaller brand, and this is something Anthony talked about, or as any type of brand or retail brand, the margins in retail are not great. So people ask, why doesn't everybody just recycle? And I was at a fantastic, bigger American retailer for 4 years prior to Gab. Why? Or no, well, I just said it out loud. Prior to Thousand Fell. I mean, it's early here on the West Coast, but why couldn't, why can't these bigger brands recycle? And when you think about these brands who are responsive to the street, their profit margins are tight. For them to put 10, 15% OpEx into building out a recycling network or a reverse logistics system, it's a really tall order. And we'll get to partnerships and where we see partnerships really helping within the circular economy. But the first hurdle to recycling a product or even thinking about a new waste stream for a product other than landfill would be take back. And that's another, returns or reverse logistic cost, another warehousing expense, another expense to think about on the back end. So that's something we've really had to try to figure out. A, how can we afford it? B, how can we think about building a business model and a pricing structure that allows us to take back product and pay for recycling? And how do we incentivize and how do we think about a circular economy that incentivizes both consumers and brands? Because unfortunately, the end value of that fiber isn't going to be quite as high as just creating new. And it's the same conundrum we've seen with plastics recycling. And so can you instead make it a part of the experience of the product or the experience of the brand and justify the extra cost in the product cost from day one? And so just even rethinking that business model and thinking through how we were going to build the brand and what it would look like, not just year one, but year 3 when we get to scale, and what does scale look like, and how do we price products? That was and has been another big, maybe not hurdle, but challenge that we've had to kind of figure out with the consumer business, thinking through cost of recycling.
Great, thank you. That's a really, there's so much food for thought in that. I think you really broke down so many levels of the challenges. And Jen, as a platform, you're dealing with this whole other set of challenges because you've got to get the goods and sort them and figure out what they're worth and all these other things. Could you speak a little bit about it?
Yeah, yeah, I was nodding the whole time, Chloe was talking, because, if, everybody was thinking the way that, Thousand Fell are and these guys are, it would be a lot different, place, right? I would echo just a lot of the same stuff, as a startup business that's trying to kind of turn things a little bit and not be, the resale piece, right? Is to try to make it so that the consumer keeps the value of the goods, and you're kind of changing that dynamic a little bit. A big challenge definitely is just getting people's heads wrapped around like a swap mentality and how would that work versus, a buy sell. We've talked a lot, and we're actually, we'll getting into the partnerships thing too, but like of how can we, in the reverse logistics piece, that was a huge challenge for us even up front, where it was like, as a small startup kind of trying to find the right person to talk to at USPS and FedEx. And I know that sounds silly, but like, no, I want the return piece first, but I don't want to pay for it until they actually use it. And I want that cost. I don't care if it takes 3 weeks to get to, I do care, but like 3 weeks to get to me, I want it to be as cheap as possible. Like, and then the, to build on that, like there obviously are costs involved with shipping, storing, photographing, reshipping out, all of these things. And I think, the mentality that folks then have is just like, well, why I could get this shirt used for, a trade credit, $3, but I could go buy it at, Target for, on sale for $3. Like, and I get that. Obviously ours is structured definitely so that, it's, buying better quality so that, you really couldn't, but, and that's not the thing, but, having people's thinking through, is that, should you be doing that? Is that $3 just then whatever you're spending at and I don't want to pick on Target, there's whatever, but there's a time and a place for all of these things. But, is there, more mentality that needs to kind of change with people's mindsets about, what we're talking about here is, on the fashion side of, is it something you're just going to buy, and is it kind of an operating cost for your household that you're just going to buy it and then ditch it, and there's no residual value, and that as I think people's mentalities are changing, I think people are thinking about a lot more things of like, maybe if I just, buy less, buy better quality, buy secondhand, things that I could in fact get value out of at the end. And that's kind of where we've focused, is like, and we hear this a lot from our customers, is it's changed how they actually shop retail. Like, we're not going to have, we're unique SKUs, right? So that's another huge challenge, right? But, so we're not going to have a full run of a full suite of sizes. So having some flexibility there. But so if somebody does buy something, retail, of thinking about buying a better quality thing, maybe you wait for that nice, slightly, that organic brand, that, something else to go on sale, because its residual value, back in the, in the Swoondle system is going to be higher. And we hear that a lot. I'll wait because I know that thing will be traded at a level 3 versus at a level 2. And I think as people's, they evolve in their shopping and their mentality. I mean, we're all been thinking about this as part of our business for so long, that we're kind of in the weeds. And I think as more and more businesses take this and start talking about it as a thing that we all should be doing, my hope is that it trickles down and trickles up, right? It becomes, businesses driving it down of that this is the way to do it, and then consumers demanding it, and it comes back, full circle.
As you talk, I'm feeling like, as a platform, MPB, like, you're speaking our language, thousands of unique models and SKUs, and everything with its own price and valuation, and volume coming in and volume coming out. The scale piece is just extremely challenging. But Tony, I want to get your POV on some of these challenges, because I know that TerraCycle in part exists to help solve some of these challenges. So, where do you go in, and how do you feel like you really help other businesses really tackle these things?
Mm-hmm. I'm jotting notes down as everyone's talking. As this question comes up a lot, and I've been working in this space for 10 years now. Sustainability is hard, and I think that's the one thing that maybe people take for granted. It's not just a flippant choice to be sustainable or not sustainable. Like, sustainability, circularity is challenging. And for a lot of the reasons that Chloe and Jenna already expressed, like, the first is cost. Like, sustainability is an incremental cost. And if you think of the way that we as society kind of shifted after World War II, we have this like tremendous baby boom. We have advances in polymer science. We have the birth of disposability. And from then until now, we have enormous global conglomerates that have been making that model so efficient, right? It is cheap to live in disposability. And beside that, it is convenient to live in disposability, right? So when you add a busy life, and it's only probably been busier, and everybody on this call is probably working harder than they ever have before, working from home and COVID, and you add in convenience, you add in affordability, like, it's so easy for us as a society to default into that way. And to tackle the challenges of scalability and affordability takes a will, right? And I think without that, TerraCycle wouldn't exist. When we work with partners like Thousand Fell, and we work with partners like Kraft Heinz, they're partnering with TerraCycle voluntarily. Nothing says that they have to work with us. And as I'm sure Stuart and Chloe can attest to, we're not cheap. We're an expensive option, right? So there needs to be the will, and that's one of the hardest things for us as TerraCycle to do, because we are voluntary, because we are expensive compared to the alternative, which is nothing. We need to have partners that want to do the right thing and are willing to change the norm of how society is working. So I think that's at its core one of the biggest challenges that we have as society. And then if we we look at the consumer has so much power. And sometimes I don't think they realize it. And if I look at our business, we've seen tremendous growth in the last few years. And I don't think that it is a coincidence. If you look at where the world is going, for me, the turning point was David Attenborough's Blue Planet, right? And the idea of more, and Ellen MacArthur coming on saying more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. Like all of that just triggered a generation. And consumers want to be sustainable now. And for the very first time, I feel as though we're able to start to talk about sustainability at scale. And the hope is that scalability alleviates some of the challenges that manufacturers have when it comes to sustainability, because it drops that price point, right? So I feel like scalability and affordability is one of the biggest challenges to circularity. And the people who can affect that the most are the consumer. And what I want to say is for me, when you buy a product, you are voting with your dollars. And if anybody's heard our CEO talk, he talks about this a lot. When you buy a product, you are voting with your dollars to say, this is what I want to see, right? This is what I want you to make for me, right? And when you buy something that is inherently sustainable, you are sending a message that this is where we want companies to invest and to go. And I think that's happening now more than ever before, but there are still challenges, right? If we look at, and we have a lot of partners in the coffee capsule industry, every time somebody buys a coffee capsule over, a 2-pound bag of coffee, you're saying that this is the convenience that I want, even though it's a more wasteful product than the coffee bag. And that's going to send a message to a coffee company to continue to make that. So I think consumers have the most power to help change the challenges of sustainability. And then I think the second thing, and because Chloe and Stuart are on this call, I'm going to call them out. I think sustainability shouldn't be the reason why we buy something, right? Like I love your shoes because your shoes are beautiful, right? And oh, by the way, they are sustainable. Sustainability should not be the reason to do something. It should be part of the product no matter what. And I think that every time consumers buy those types of products, we're sending again that message that this is what we want to see. And that is the challenge of circularity that I would like to solve in my lifetime, is that when I buy a product, it's not because it's sustainable, it's just because it's the best product. And by the way, that is also the most sustainable product. And I think when we do that, some of the really hard challenges that we have today, hopefully will start to fall and the value chain shifts.
That's fantastic. And it occurs to me that you said earlier in this conversation, Tony, there's no silver bullet for circularity or sustainability, but we have all now talked around the idea of partnerships and collaborations. And that seems really, really important and fundamental to actually doing exactly what you just said, which is making sustainability part of the best product the consumer can buy, but also achieving scale and changing the supply and value chain, which both Jen and Chloe have spoken about. So I would love to hear a little bit more about some of these really unique partnerships that you're doing out there that are really changing even just beyond what you're doing as a business and having other ripple effects. And Jen, I know you've got some really interesting ones cooking right now. So I'd love for you to chat a little bit about those.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everybody's already kind of touched on a lot of this, and us as well. Like for initially our focus, first was on the kind of just value proposition, and I couldn't agree with you more, Tony, that sustainability is incredibly important, but it shouldn't be the only reason. We should be doing it primarily because there goes my coffee. It's okay, we're fine. That we should have a great product, we should have a great service in our case, where it's like it's adding tremendous value to the consumer, but then it also is sustainable. It is not the reason we do it. It is just a key pillar in kind of our ethos of how we want to, you know, live our lives. We have really tried to seek other, you know, kind of like-minded brands out there. And, you know, we focus on, you know, parents primarily, and, you know, parents of younger children. And so one of our recent partnerships that has been really successful and interesting is with Ergo. Ergo Baby, their carriers, they have the same, you know, ethos, and they developed their own trade-in program, which is amazing. And they've been selling out of them, which is also amazing. Like, they've demonstrated that they can re-commerce them. The challenge that they were having is that on two folds is that they weren't getting enough back. And so we've then launched as a collection point, so that all of our members and everybody, because we're already in that, we have that mindset of all these customers that already in that trade-in mode, and they can trade in their carriers with all their clothes. So they don't have to say, oh, I'm going to send this over here and this over here. They don't want to be the sorters themselves. They can now dump it all in their bag, and it comes to us. We've already seen a bunch of those kind of rolling in, which is wonderful. And it kind of just, again, having two brands then talking about the importance of this and kind of making it easy for people to do it, right? It's like curbside recycling back in the, you know, 80s and 90s, when you had to take everything. Very few people did it. You know, we're trying to kind of, you know, and I think, you know, Tony, I'm sure, is all over this. Is like, how do we make it so that it's simple and easy for people, and that they not only does the world get better because of it, but does the actual person reap that value. And, you know, we have amazing partnerships with nonprofits. So our Room to Grow partnership is kind of how we actually ended up here. We donate a ton of stuff. We let our customers donate a ton of stuff. They actually trade with us. So because they're only focused on 0 to 3-year-old children, for the most part, families of 0 to 3-year-old children, they want to let customers, people in the environment or in the US, donate clothes that are bigger than that. They parlay it through us to get the clothes and stuff that they need in the seasons that they need. And then more and more we've just kind of starting this program, and it's been, I would say over the last, well, it was pre-COVID, it was starting, and then it kind of dulled, and now it's really kind of booming again, is kind of having that take back program, but supporting other brands to be able to kind of do a take back program, and not a take back program that Chloe and Stuart were really talking about, where they are tending to take it all apart and reuse, which is amazing. But more that on the reciprocal side of it, of being able to, you know, trade it back in and get something for that, and have the brands really encouraging that the customer can do that and build that brand loyalty back. It could take form of just simply trade it in. Here's an easy way to trade your stuff in, and you can, you know, trade for the next size or season. It could go as far as that re-commerce and providing that solution for the kids space, where, you know, it's not your price point is not, you know, $150+ for a, you know, winter jacket. It is lower. So how do you kind of constrain the costs for a brand to make it so that it can still make sense economically, and have it not only be a break even. Hopefully you get to the point where it's not only paying for itself, but maybe there's even some revenue upside because of the customer's commitment back to that brand. We hear in like surveying folks that they're like, a brand that would offer take back programs are like willing to spend more money with that brand even upfront, because they know that there's a place for those items to go at the end, and that they can get value back. It's like 70% say they would spend more with a brand, which is great. That means people are starting to think about this.
Yeah, and really flexing that consumer power at the end of the day, really. We actually do have a couple of questions that I want to get to. I think I can actually consolidate the questions into one question, but I did want to give, because Chloe and Stuart and Tony have alluded to this partnership, I did want to give you guys just a few minutes, if you wouldn't mind, to just quickly say, how did this work between Thousand Fell and TerraCycle?
Yeah, Tammy, I appreciate that. This was actually something that
Tony, jump in. We can.
Yeah, for sure. This was something that we actually announced back in October of last year. It was a larger announcement with the TerraCycle team, and then also with UPS. I think what's so interesting is that, you know, when we go out and are sort of in the circles within sort of the circularity movement, there's a lot of talk around like material innovation and circular design, which I think is great. I think it's like really bringing a lot of people into the conversation that way. The real big, like 10,000 pound gorilla in the room is, how do you take things back at scale and at cost? And then how do you like collect them and catalog them and separate them and really do like the nitty gritty of the reverse logistic part of that. And so, you know, really early on kind of in our journey, we got to know the TerraCycle team, and have proven to be a fantastic partner when it comes to like collecting and cataloging and thinking really strategically about waste streams and how to build those. And so right now, TerraCycle is handling all our collection and separation of our footwear, which is really great. And so, you know, when you go to the 1,000 Fell site and you go to return product to be recycled, it's getting shipped to a TerraCycle facility, which has been great. And it's not just as if like we rang them up and said, hey, do you guys want to take some shoes? And like, that was the end of it. Like a lot of heads in the room about like, okay, like where are these materials going? How are we breaking them down? Who else are we bringing into the system to like do this recycling?
And Anthony, I don't know if you want to jump in either. I think the fun part is we met TerraCycle maybe 3.5 years ago. We met Tom, and we've been like waiting to finally work together, and also have the money to work together. But where we started together was with R&D, and everything from what materials should we put into the shoe to glues to rubber compounds. And we actually, our very first Loop prototype, our very first 1,000 Fell prototype was a part of Loop, which Tony talked about. And we had a booth with Loop in Europe, and we're talking about the world's first recyclable shoe, I think back in like 2018 or early 2019. And like, we've just been thinking through, how do we get this to scale? How do we get this live? And they've been a great partner through that. And, you know, even we now, as we think about scaling 1,000 Fell and other product categories and et cetera, it's not going to happen without partnerships because of the need to get to scale for recycling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing, right? At the end of the day, the will that the two of you have and with 1,000 Fell is unbelievable. And of all of the waste streams, I feel bad calling it a waste stream because it's a beautiful product. It's not a chip bag, but it's one of the hardest. It's so complex. And to think about adhesives and to think about all of the different types of materials that allow that product to perform and look the way that it needs to perform and look, but also think about disassembly and end of life is not easy. And the fact that the two of you have been able to usher that through, when we have, you know, enormous companies in the footwear space that haven't been innovative for the last 80 years, I think is a testament to your will. So it's unbelievable, and it really is a true partnership. And we're looking at how a product is created to what it becomes at the end of its life, and then what it can become after that is amazing. And you're right. I think the first time we went public was around the World Economic Forum in 2018, which seems like a lifetime ago. And I still have a very big sample on my desk. I'd wear it myself, but I think it's a size like 15. But I think you were the model for that one, Stuart. So I think, again, that partnership, we're here to provide a solution as best we can, but without your kind of determination and will, and to think about how that product is produced and what it becomes at the end of life, our partnership doesn't happen. So I much of the credit sits directly on the two of your shoulders.
Great. Time flies when you're talking about circularity, I have to say. So I definitely, we've gotten some really interesting questions in the Q&A. We're definitely not going to be able to get to all of them, obviously, because we're running a little short on time. But really interesting question came up around the role of government? And I know this one's a little bit out of left field, but I actually think it's a great question given that this panel discussion is taking place during Refashion Week NYC, which is obviously being brought to us by the Sanitation Foundation and the Department of Sanitation in New York City, who are obviously taking a really active role in all of this. And I would, if you have some thoughts, I would just love to hear it in the context of something like Refashion Week NYC. What can our local government or agencies be doing, or even just partnerships beyond the business world, in the nonprofit world? How do you see that playing a role in circularity and scaling it up and collaboration going forward? I don't know who wants to go first. I can volunteer somebody, or if somebody would like to take this one on, I think it would be a really great way to close it. Anybody? Bueller? Tony, you probably have.
I'm happy to jump in, and I'll preface everything that I say that by no means am I somebody who works in the world of government. And TerraCycle we are a private company with a private collection program. So I think take that all with a very big grain of salt. EPR exists, right? It's very, very prevalent in Europe. It's expanding in Canada. There are discussions around it here in the United States. But I think one of the challenges of EPR and government involvement is that it continues to support the industry of profitable materials for recyclability, right? So in terms of TerraCycle's world, government involvement should expand or could expand to think about what products are coming into the supply chain. And there are some instances where there's a lot of development into, let's say, waste to energy plants. And at the end of the day, that waste to energy plant is a government subsidized product that needs to be profitable, right? And the simple fact about, and this is just one example in waste to energy, but the simple fact about a waste to energy plant is that what makes it profitable is fueling it with products that burn at a net positive caloric value, right? So if you look at what burns and produces more energy than it takes to burn something, it's materials like PET, HDPE, things that are very easily mechanically recyclable. So we're taking something out of a circular stream and feeding it into something linear to make that machine profitable. And if you look at garbage and complex materials, they burn at a negative caloric deficit. So it's not helping the recovery of what is becoming garbage. So that's my personal engagement with EPR and government involvement in circularity. So what I think about it is that it needs to be looked at from the entire supply chain, right? And I think it can't focus only on end of life, and it needs to also focus on what materials and products go into something and how it's created and assembled. Kind of like the exercise that Thousandfell went through, right? It's just not about, here's what I've made, deal with it when it's done. It's what am I thinking about putting into my product from the beginning? And I'd love to see more government involvement in that side versus just thinking about end of life, because the examples we have there aren't great.
Yeah, that was great. And actually, I think a pretty useful way to sort of tie back to some of the themes that have been brought up today around the need for real collaboration, the need for real business rigor around circularity, and a need to like really be willing to meet real challenges head on, not just at end of life, but at beginning of life. And with that, I have to say, we're actually out of time today. I really, really appreciate you all joining. I really appreciate everybody coming, taking time out of their day to talk about circularity in this really wonderful and insightful conversation. I'd like to thank Jen. I'd like to thank Tony. I'd like to thank Chloe and Stuart. You can learn more about them and their wonderful, innovative circular businesses via the internet. Again, that's Spoondle Society, that's Thousand Fell, that's TerraCycle and Loop. We are so delighted to be part of Refashion Week NYC this year, and we hope that you all have a really, really lovely day. Thanks so much for joining, you all.
Thanks,
Tammy.
Tammy.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your
Take
day.
care. Bye.
So nice to meet you all. Bye.